Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I am your host, Lori Palau, and today I'm excited to be talking with Elizabeth Sherman. Elizabeth is a life and weight loss coach who works mostly with women, but she works with some men to help them lose weight and feel better through managing easy to do, sustainable habits like diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management. Using certain cues, including cravings, hunger, energy, stress, mood, and sleep, she helps folks design the right healthy program for their body and lifestyle. And she addresses the obstacles and barriers we encounter when trying to be consistent in our desired habits. We can all achieve optimal health, which leads to better energy, focus, productivity, relationships, happiness in our lives. So, who doesn't want that? But I invited Elizabeth on our show because all of this sounds great. And we all know that there's all of these people out there that are giving us all of these tutorials and how-tos, but Elizabeth is somebody who's walked the walk and gone through her own life transformation. So I invited her on the show to really talk about her journey and how she has taken her own personal mission into now helping inspire others. On a personal note, Elizabeth is a Chicago native, but now lives in Mexico. And you guys, I'm just jealous that she's sitting here in like a tank top, and I just want to be, and I'm sitting here in like low sleeves, sipping on hot coffee. But she is still able to meet with all of her clients from the US through amazing technology like Zoom and Skype. She's a certified life coach, nutritionist, personal trainer, and all of the things. Without further ado, help me welcome Elizabeth to the show. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me, Lori. This is really exciting. So fun.
Yeah, I remember when I first was introduced to you and someone had sent me your profile, and I'm just like, yeah, health, wellness, yada, yada. And I started doing a little bit of a deeper dive into you and your story. And I was like, there's something different about her. And I really, really want to have you on to just talk to our audience, because I think there's so many parallels about your story
Mm-hmm.
and what you do that will relate and kind of crosses over with the work that I'm doing. So I gave our listeners a brief kind of overview bio, if you will, about you. But in your own words, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So, my story actually starts back in 2001 when this seems like a bad place to start, but it is the genesis, which is when my mom passed away through breast cancer. And at the time, I was about 30 years old, and I could tell that if I didn't make some changes, that my life was headed in the same trajectory as hers. And I saw how the disease really had such an impact on our entire family, but also I wanted to see, like, how do I not get cancer? And so I started doing all of this research and found out that being overweight, which I was at the time, was a huge risk factor to getting breast cancer, as well as a whole bunch of other diseases. And so that was actually the beginnings of my journey into health. And, quite honestly, I would love to say that once I discovered that, being healthier was going to prevent me from getting breast cancer, that it was just smooth sailing from there on out. But I actually had to do quite a bit of work in order to overcome all of those issues that I really had going on there. Yeah.
And, it brings up an interesting point. I'm sorry about the loss of your mom. And I think so many of us, when we are faced with any type of unexpected trauma, death, divorce, job loss, whatever, that becomes our aha moment, right? And what we may have known, but kind of like pushed it off to the side or put it on the back burner, all of a sudden becomes immediately like butts the line and moves right into the forefront. And, I think that's just true for so many people. And I think it results, and tell me what you think, I think it results from a little bit of trying to reclaim control over an area that you have no control. Like, oh my gosh, am I just at the mercy of a diagnosis of, whatever the situation is going to be? And what can I do now proactively to help kind of either slow that down or change the trajectory of my future?
Right. That's actually a really good point. That it's kind of a wake up call where we look and have this time where we can evaluate our lives like, oh, yeah, that's where our life is going. And if I don't want it to go down that path, then I'm going to need to make some decisions about whether, yeah, what I need to do in order to make sure that it doesn't keep happening. Yeah, for sure.
So what did you do at that point? Like, what were the small steps? Because again, I think whatever it is for us, and we're like, we're going to make a change, whether it's with our finances, whether it's with getting more organized, changing the way that we eat. We all have to start somewhere, and sometimes just even knowing where to begin is overwhelming. Can you walk us through kind of how you started actually moving the needle?
Yeah, so in a previous life, I used to be an executive for a software company. And so I had already started exercising, and I had already decided that I was traveling a lot. So what I did for my diet at the time was the only thing I actually knew what to do. And at this point, I wasn't educated at all in terms of diet and exercise. So what I did was I actually became vegetarian, which looking back probably was not the best decision because I was still eating things like French fries and, fried bloomin' onions and things like that, and having a lot of cheese. And so that probably wasn't the best decision looking back, but it was the only thing that I knew what to do. And so it wasn't until I actually started, becoming more educated. And actually thinking about it right now, one of the biggest aha moments was when I started logging my food,
Mm,
and I started noticing how many calories were in, peanut butter, or I could have 10 grapes, or I could have 10 raisins, and they're the same number of calories, yet grapes are going to be so much more satisfying.
mhm.
Right. And so noticing that those things like vegetables that have a higher water content to them are going to be more satisfying and keep me fuller longer than those things that don't.
So I talk a lot about, it's funny, I make the food logging analogy quite a bit, because when I'm working with clients or talking to people about, how they're accumulating stuff, the first thing, or it could be their time, it might not even be their stuff. I'll say, like, keep a log of your activities, keep a log. And I say it's a lot like a food journal, which is like not always the most fun thing because it's super telling. I've done it myself. Um, how did you naturally have the discipline to do it? I think that comes down for a lot of people, is finding to say that I'm going to actually do it. I'm going to be honest with myself. I'm going, because it's revealing, when you're like, I don't eat a lot, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, but I'm cleaning the chicken nuggets off my kid's plate, or I'm finishing this, or I'm walking by, the candy dish and scooping up a handful of M&Ms, and all of that stuff adds up. So just finding that discipline to say, I'm actually going to do it. Was that hard for you, or was that a pretty seamless part of your process?
Well, I think that what food logging did for me initially was it allowed me to be more aware of when I was having those, I don't want to say little cheats, but like those little snacks that really kind of add up. So the first pass at food logging was really getting clear on how many calories each thing was. Now, that being said, I probably did not do very well with my food logging. Like I was one of those people who would use the food logging as proof of my following the diet. And so on weekends when I wasn't following the diet, I would be like, oh yeah, there was just no way that I could possibly log everything. So I wouldn't. And if you're using food logging in that way, which I totally get, then it's not actually really helpful, because then when you are gaining weight or you're maintaining, you have these gaps where you can't look at it and see, oh, well, yeah, that's because I was overeating that weekend.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can totally see that. And it's about having that accountability to yourself, which for
Mm-hmm.
some people comes more naturally than others, and we've talked about that on the show as well, about people that need that outer accountability, and other people that just innately have that kind of self-discipline and motivation. So another thing I want to talk about, because I'm sure, like you said, I know you've had setbacks along the way as you're going through this. And, this is where I could start to see some parallels in, we're having progress, and then we have a setback,
Mm-hmm.
a vacation, just a bad night where we're just like, screw it, I'm having the bowl of ice cream or
Mm-hmm.
a pint of ice cream. How did you get back on track? Because I think there's a lot of people that are probably listening and say, you know what? It takes so hard for me to start making progress, but it's so easy to just fall, to take 10 steps back. How did you do it? And what's your advice to people that might be in that struggle?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think that what happens is that I had just this really deep desire. Like, the death of my mom was huge. And so I think that that was really a propelling factor, that I had to figure out a way to make this happen for me. And in fact, I remember having kind of a, come to Jesus moment with myself, where I was like, look, you cannot keep doing what you are doing. I was totally over exercising. I had this belief in my head that my body did not adhere to normal diet advice. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. And so I had this, awakening with myself, that I was like, okay, look, Elizabeth, you need to either figure out how to work with your body, or you need to accept your body for what it is, because what we're doing right now just is not working. And so to answer your question about what is the advice that I give to my clients in terms of when they have quote unquote failures, is the only time that a failure is truly a failure is when we don't learn from it. And so if we have, let's say, ice cream on a Tuesday night and we're not supposed to, and I say supposed to with air quotes,
Sure.
um, we can either beat ourselves up about it, or we can just move on from it and get curious about it, and try to understand, why did I feel like I needed to have ice cream on a Tuesday night when I hadn't planned for it?
Right. And I think that's kind of where I was hoping you would go. I didn't know, but like, again, it's that, because that's kind of what I do, is like, why did you feel the need to buy that thing that you've got 10 of? Or why did you feel the need to do X, overcommit yourself when you already knew that your schedule was jam packed with things, or whatever it is. So it's not so much as, yeah, you want to look at the act and you want to correct it, so that, but the best, or the most sustainable, I don't want to say it's the best, right? But I think the way that we have that lasting change is to identify, like, catch ourselves in the moment. And if we can kind of name it, like, oh, I'm starting to, like, when I start to feel frustrated or overwhelmed or anxious, this is my default. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I just go on Amazon and buy myself something. You know what I mean? Or I go to the refrigerator and I do this, and try to redirect that behavior into something healthier.
Right. And It's kind of funny. I've started talking to my clients about like, okay, so we're starting right now. What if you already knew that you were going to fail 100 times by the time that you finished the process? And at 101 attempts, you would be 100% like fixed for the rest of your life and ready to move on. Wouldn't, instead of making failure as something bad,
Mhm.
the key is really to make failure not be something that holds us back. The quicker we can turn around from those failures and become resilient and really move past it, the better we are going to be moving forward, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we're all like, and we're going to, kind of talk about this after the break. But I mean, we all know just from flipping 2020, like life is going to throw us crazy curveballs that we never, I mean, we all knew it. I mean, obviously, like you knew with death of your mom, we've all experienced the unexpected. But I mean, there's going to be stuff that comes up that's out of our control. And it's, how are we rolling with the punches? How are we doing this? And how are we, I think a lot of us can use food or stuff as, a self-soothing mechanism. And I think at times, like, it's okay if you want to self-medicate with wine or
Hmm.
something. No judgment here on myself.
Right.
But, ultimately, you don't want this to create patterns of behavior that are going to be at your own detriment. And I think once you can start to see progress, and you tell me in your own story and with your clients, once you start seeing progress, that becomes motivation to continue forward. Like once you start seeing that you're putting in this work, you're doing these changes, and the weight's falling off, or I'm sleeping better at night, or I'm feeling healthier, or I have more energy, or what, fill in the blank.
Right. You're absolutely right that we need to feel like we're seeing progress. I actually had this really good analogy that, okay, let's pretend you're in two different lines in the grocery store. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One line is really super long, but it's making progress. And the other line is super short, but it's not making progress. Which line would you rather be in? You'd probably rather be in the long line making progress than the short line not making progress, because we need to have that reinforcement, that validation that we're actually getting somewhere, and that creates the ability for us to stick to it. Yeah.
I love it. And as you said that, like I had this image in my mind of like driving and knowing like here's the short way, but there's like a wreck or road construction, so you're sitting in standstill traffic. How many times have I like gone around and taken the longer route just so that I can at least not be sitting still? And
Yeah,
that's kind of
that's
what
perfect.
I'm thinking of as you said that analogy. I think that's great. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to continue on our conversation and just talk about, some positive strategies that people can do, like actionable strategies for people at home. So sit tight. So here we are, we're in 2021. A lot of us are just trying to put one foot in front of the other, recovering from, the dumpster fire of 2020, which set us all back in so many kind of facets of our lives. And instead of shaming where we are, just kind of like, okay, here's where we are. Let's start putting one foot in front of another. Where do you see people when if they want to start making some healthy choices, if they want to start moving the needle and are just like, I'm just overwhelmed. Would the first place that you recommend be starting a food journal? Would it be, tell us where you think somebody at home could just start to make some progress on their own?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it actually doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. We make being healthier so much more difficult than it needs to be. I see it every New Year's that people are like, I need to start exercising and I need to go vegetarian and organic and I need to do all of these overhaul habits, and it becomes too unsustainable for people to maintain. And so for many of my clients, what I recommend is increasing your water and increasing your vegetables. Like, honestly, those are the two main things that I have my clients do. And whenever they come to me after like a weekend where they're like, oh, this was terrible, I overate, I'm like, eat your vegetables, drink your water, and then let's reevaluate at the end of the week and see, did you really gain weight when they think that they did? Yeah. So those are my two pieces of
And
advice.
that's like, anybody can do that. You don't
Yeah.
need $1,000,000. You don't
Nope.
need like, that's just easy strategies. Here's a question that I didn't like pose to you beforehand, but I'm actually curious about, more for myself as well as for the audience, is the role of eating right, not, I don't want to say versus, but exercise, in
Mm.
terms of, okay, if people want to see transformation, and obviously there's not like a one size fits all, but how important is the role of each of those? And do you think that one trumps the other in any specific area?
That's a really good question. And yes, one is way more important than the other. So I mainly work with women over the age of 40. And this, yeah, it's mostly true for women over the age of 40 that our hormones shift so that we become more sensitive to insulin and we become more reactive to stress. So, given that information, well, and also exercise is a terrible, terrible, terrible weight loss method. Okay.
You just, I'm hugging you through the phone right now, because how many people have white knuckled, plowed through things, not found results, and like beat themselves up? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So, well, okay, very simply, if I run for a half an hour, okay, so now, first of all, let me say that calories in versus calories out is the foundation of weight loss and weight maintenance. Okay. That doesn't change for anybody. However, if I run for a half an hour, let's say that I burn 300 calories, I can easily eat a bowl of ice cream for 300 calories, right? And just negate that. Now, as I mentioned, for women over the age of 45, well, for all women, let's talk about that we've been conditioned to the fact that exercise is a way of burning calories. And obviously, eating is a way that we consume calories. But what I prefer to focus on is that exercise is no longer a way for us to get rid of excess calories. Exercise actually becomes a stress management tool.
Mm.
Okay. And so, as younger women, if we overate ice cream or had too many cookies or, drank too many glasses of wine, the next day we could go out and run or over exercise and burn off those calories and be okay. But because we are more sensitive to stress as we age, over exercising just creates more stress. And so it kind of upsets the balance of our body's hormones. So, where those techniques worked before when we were younger women, they don't work anymore as older women. So, we really need to decouple exercise from the calories out equation. And so, what that means then is that we have to be, I'm sorry, but more intentional about the calories or the way that we eat. We can't get away with poor eating habits anymore. We can't get away with overeating pasta or overeating sweets or all of those things that we really desire. And we really need to get out of those bad habits that we had as younger women.
I know, because I used to do the Snickers diet, which was, I'll tell you a quick side story. So, and I think I may have told this on like an earlier episode, but I'll just tell it with you really quick. So, I've always had like a really unhealthy relationship with food, like whatever. So, in my early 20s, and I was never overweight, but in my early 20s, I felt like I wanted to lose weight. It was right when the point system of Weight Watchers was like just taking off. And it said you're allowed 22 calories a day. And not calories, sorry, 22 points a day.
Yeah.
I loved Snickers. That was like my downfall. And Diet Coke. That was my thing. We're talking the 90s.
Snickers and Diet Coke. I love
Snickers
that.
and Diet Coke. Well, a Snickers bar was like 21 points, a king size Snickers. So I would intermittent fast, or AKA starve myself all day, drink coffee and Diet Coke, have one king size Snickers bar a day, and hit my points. Like, how unhealthy is that? And my husband would call it the Snickers diet. And the scary part is, because I was in my early 20s, like I lost some weight, which of course I was completely unhealthy. It was not sustainable, all of the things. But I like joke about like what not to do. But again, I was basically just doing a math equation and not looking at all of the other external factors. And now fast forward to, me being almost 50. And I don't think that Snickers diet would work. First of all, I couldn't do it. But even if I tried, I don't think I would have the same desired, outcome as I did when I was 24 or whatever.
Yeah, your body is completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, not eating sugar, not eating processed foods, all of the things that we kind of know, or we should know not to do are, kind of like probably the first things. Like you said, increase your vegetables and water. What about eating like paleo or vegan versus gluten or not gluten? I mean, so many people have different food intolerances and whatnot. I think we could go down rabbit holes. Again, speaking from personal experience of let me try this and let me try that and try to kind of find what works for me. And I think like organizing, you have to find a system that's going to be sustainable and work with you and your lifestyle and what makes sense with your body.
Yeah.
How do we go about finding what that is for us?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, I think that far too many of us move into paleo or keto or vegetarian or all of these advanced diets before we actually have the foundations of health in place. And I actually have a document on my website, which is the 8 basic things that healthy people do. There are 8 basic habits, and they're things that all of you know, which are, I'll go through them right now. Drink water, eat vegetables, eat protein, walk or move 30 minutes a day, manage your stress, get enough sleep, don't overeat or eat just enough. And then the last one is limit your treats. Okay, because you can have sugar, you can have wine, you can have all of those things in a healthy diet. Now, what happens though is people are moving on into keto or into intermittent fasting or any of these advanced techniques, and they're not having enough vegetables in their diet, or they're not getting enough movement, or they're not getting enough sleep. Sleep is huge when it comes to, managing your weight. And so if you move on into these advanced techniques, then you're not going to have success because you don't have the basics mastered either.
No, that makes total sense. I love it. And I just wrote it down because we're going to link to that in our show notes.
Oh, okay, great.
I want to link specifically. I mean, obviously we'll link to all your stuff, but I specifically want to just give people like a click to that document. What about fear? Because I think, again, when I talk to a lot of people, just thinking in my own sphere of clutter and organization, we kind of take comfort in what we know. It's like the devil you know versus the devil you don't. And I think for some people, either A, there's this preconceived notion that if I shed this weight, my life is going to be great. Kind of like if I make my pantry, Pinterest worthy, all of a sudden my life is going to be wonderful, which we all know that that's not accurate. And I think I would imagine the same could kind of go, hold true in your world. But I also think that people are afraid of how much time this is going to take, right? We know we go through our habits, whether they're good or bad, at some point in muscle memory, right? They're just going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
And for people, especially that have spent a lifetime of either not having a system or strategy or poor habits, it takes work and time to make those changes. So, how do you work with your clients, or what advice do you have to our listeners out there that maybe want to do this, but are almost afraid to do it at the same time?
Yeah. I love this question because it actually ports over to exactly what you do as well. And so, what I do with my clients is we start imagining, I have this concept called the future version. So, future you. So, we'll do it with you, Lori. So, what I want you to do is I want you to go a year in the future, 2 years in the future, whatever it is in the future. And I really want you to imagine, like, put yourself in the position of you having been successful in whatever goal it is that you want to accomplish. Whether it's having this amazingly organized, house, or that you've lost the weight. And, what does that mean? How do you feel about that? And then start thinking about, how do you think about food? How do you think about procrastination? How do you think about exercise? What are the thoughts that future you has about food, about exercise, about your body, about your living space? What are the vision that you want to create in the future? And then what we get to do is today figure out what habit we want to make or break. And we need to let that habit be hard right now.
Mm,
It has to be hard now, knowing that the future version of me isn't struggling with this.
mhm.
Okay. And so once we can, and in the moment when you want to have that Snickers bar, or you want to have that ice cream, or you're procrastinating on putting your stuff away, you can check in with the future version of yourself and ask her advice about, what does she want to do in this situation? And then, like, take the strength from her. It's kind of an interesting
No,
concept.
it is, and I love it. And again, not playing devil's advocate, but I guess I am. I'm not trying to though.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to poke holes in your process. I just, and
Yeah.
again, I of course, and make everything an analogy back to what I
Yeah.
do. Our negative voice, our negative self-talk, I think
Mm.
sometimes is so much louder.
Mhm.
And I see people just kind of wave the white flag in defeat, like, well, I'm 45 years old and this is it, and this is how it is, or this has always been my habit, so I'm kind of destined for this. Or instead of change, knowing that we can make these intention. I think for me, as you were talking, the one word that kept coming up in my mind was intentionality, like
Mhm.
being really intentional about
Mhm.
something specific
Yeah.
and not trying to take all of it at once. Like,
Mhm.
not, maybe if you are somebody that doesn't really have any healthy eating habits, just
Mhm.
start with one thing. Like, say, I'm not going to eat dessert, or I'm going to just cut out one thing, as opposed to saying, that's it. I'm cutting out all dairy. I'm cutting out all gluten. And again,
Yeah.
I speak from experience of
Yeah.
being that person that says, that's it. I'm done with my clutter. I'm tearing apart my entire house at once. Well, you're trying to eat an elephant in one
Mhm.
bite. Yeah, I mean, in one chunk. So I think for me, what I'm hearing is try to project what you want and then take these small steps along the way to help you go through it day by day.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to address that negative voice that you talked about, because I actually have tools that I use with my clients that allow them to notice. So I talk about the two different parts of our brain. We have what we call the higher self, which goes out and it decides that we're going to, lose 50 pounds, and it creates a plan of how we're going to get there. And then we have this lower brain that doesn't care about our plan to lose 50 pounds. It just wants the Oreos right now, and it wants to sit on the couch, and it doesn't want to exercise. The lower brain functions under something that we call the motivational triad. And what the motivational triad is that the lower brain wants to seek pleasure, it wants to avoid pain, and it wants to do it as efficiently as possible. And so when we have these thoughts in our head of, this seems too difficult, I just want to give up, all of those things that really are not for our greater good, right? They're not what we want in terms of, long-term effectiveness, but we can see where the lower brain is trying to keep us safe. It's trying to avoid the pain, and it's trying to seek pleasure. And so all of those things, like when we can start to recognize that the lower brain is actually lying to us, then we can counteract and turn those thoughts around so that we can ultimately get what it is that we want.
I love it. And see, I'm a big person that loves to like name something. Not that we want to label people or label
Yeah.
things and use it as an excuse, but I feel like once you can name something, that's when you can disarm it. So for me, the next time I'm like, it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm like, screw it, I'm just going to eat that cookie, I can go, nope, that's your lower brain talking. And instead, just what would be the counteract to that? So like use that as an example for somebody, because I'm going to totally be doing this tonight, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Well, yeah. So I think one of the thoughts that our lower brain offers us is, one won't hurt.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
so noticing when that thought pops up, and then really questioning, like, is that true?
Mm-hmm.
And in the grand scheme of diet, one cookie isn't that big of a deal, but it's when the next thought pops up, which is, oh, well, now that you've had one, you may as well eat the quart of ice cream,
Yes.
and then keep going. And then the next morning, this lower brain is such a jerk that the next morning, the lower brain's like, wow, you really screwed up yesterday,
Yeah.
and uses self-loathing and
Mm-hmm.
beats us up about it, right?
Yes. Yes.
So understanding why we don't want to eat the cookie is actually the more important thing. So when the lower brain offers the thought of, one won't hurt, we can say, yeah, lower brain, I hear you, but we're not doing that right now. And a technique to actually, for the listeners to use, is if it's not in the plan, then say, you know what, we're not doing that right now, but if I really want it tomorrow, I can have it.
Oh, I love that, because I use that with people with buying with stuff. It's like, just put the pause, I'm sure it'll be there tomorrow online, leave it in your
Yeah.
cart, or if you're at Home Goods or wherever, again, I'm not knocking any stores, like just wait, don't do it, and then see if you really want it. And that works.
Yeah.
I've just never thought to do it. It's like, so common sense. I'm like, hello, it's pretty, but sometimes you just need to hear it from somebody else. So I
Yeah.
think that's great. And
Mhm.
again, it's simple strategies that we can all use and do. And again, there are going to be times we're going to struggle, but the more often
Yeah.
we do it,
Mhm.
the more often it becomes muscle memory.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
that's the
Because, the
takeaway.
more you do it, the more easy it becomes. It's going to be hard in the beginning, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. We're going to, I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but we're going to take one more quick break. But before we do, let our listeners know. Oh, sorry. No, take a drink of water. It's okay. Go for it. Take a drink. I know. Let our listeners know the best place that they can learn more about you, connect up with you, all the things. And of course, like I said, we'll have links to everything in our show notes, but they want
Yeah,
to
you
go.
can find me on my website at www.elizabethsherman.com. You can find me on Instagram at esherman68, and on Facebook, I am Total Health by Elizabeth.
I love it. All right, everybody, sit tight. We're going to take one more quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to put Elizabeth in the hot seat for our wrap-up questions. So sit tight. Okay, Elizabeth, this has been awesome. I hope our listeners have learned as much as I do, because I am totally putting your stuff into practice in my own life. So because I can always use some accountability myself. So this has been super helpful. I always ask our guests a few questions because our show is all about inspiration and motivation and honesty and authenticity. So first, I'm going to ask you, what books and or resources, it could be a podcast, whatever, has been inspirational for you, has like been transformational, that you would either pass on to clients or friends that you could share with our listeners? That would be the first question. And then
Yeah, I have so many. First, I am certified as a life coach through the Life Coach School, and Brooke Castillo, who is the owner of it, she has an amazing podcast where you can learn all of the tools that I actually coach my clients with. So that would definitely be something where I'd start. Probably one of the first books that I started with personal development was Brene Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection. I love that book.
so many people use that.
Yeah,
So many people say that as their one of their tools that
yeah.
they use, or books that they use. Yes, I have that book as well. So
And then the other one that I've been recommending to my clients recently is called The Untethered Soul.
I love that book. It's such a great book. I love The Untethered Soul.
Yeah. And I love it because of the way he talks about the watcher
Mm-hmm.
and the bad roommate, who is that lower brain that we were talking about, and how that lower brain, the bad roommate, just like tells terrible things to us. And yeah, it's just,
Well, we have obviously podcast listeners, so I'll have them go check out. What's the name of the podcast?
it's called the Life Coach School Podcast. Yeah.
All
With
right.
Brooke Castillo.
All right. Well, we'll make sure that we link up to that as well as the books. And then our last two questions, which are lighthearted and fun, or you could be super serious if you want, is where in this particular season of your life do you feel the most organized, and where do you feel like you could have some areas of growth, or as I like to say, feel like a little bit of a hot mess?
You know, it's funny. Actually kind of feel like a hot mess in my living environment, because we live in Mexico. We are renting right now, and we are in process of building a new house. And the rental just isn't right. And so, like, my kitchen isn't organized, and I don't want to spend the money, obviously, to renovate. So I feel really disorganized in my kitchen right now, and all of my stuff.
I
So yeah.
gotcha.
But as far as most organized, I probably feel most organized in my food and in my business processes. Yeah.
That's great. And I will just say, and how exciting that you're building a house in Mexico. It's like everybody's dream, I would think. I always talk about different types of clutter, and one of them being situational clutter.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something, at least, even though it's probably frustrating and maybe unnerving and stressful and what all of the things, at least it's temporary. At least
Yeah.
this is not a long-term thing. It's just getting you to the next point. So hopefully, that'll be sooner than later. But how
Exactly. Yeah.
exciting. How
Yeah.
exciting. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on our show and sharing your wisdom with our community. If this is your first time tuning into our show, welcome. Make sure to click the subscribe button so new episodes will get downloaded each and every week. You can find us all over social media at Simply Be Organized, or on Facebook. You can hop into our Facebook group called This Organized Life Podcast. Until next week, I'm Lori Palau. Peace out.